shame for so many people, because a lot of people here is talking about how they can't really reveal it to their loved ones, like we spoke about the stigma. So how do you reveal it knowing there's a possibility that you might be treated differently?
If you could mobilize a group of people, what movement would you mobilize and why?
I would call my movement the mindful movement. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death between people aged 15 and 29. 1 in 3 people are expected to suffer from mental illnesses in their lifetime. So I believe that mobilizing people to strive for mental health would actually fix so many social ills in our society. And that is what I would mobilize.
Let's see. Hi, Samantha.
Hi. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Shudi?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I was talking a bit about bipolar and why it's quite bipolar disorder and why it's quite important to have this topic, because you get a lot of people that misuse the word bipolar, or you're so bipolar, when they're trying to describe something else, and there's a lot of face value diagnoses of people just in general. So I think it's quite important for us to have this informative session where we actually get to know what bipolar is. And 2 people have already asked questions that I'm going to just try to add in tonight. But again, thank you so much for joining us. I think the big question
Thank you.
I think as someone that lives, as you're someone that lives with bipolar disorder, you're the perfect person to speak to about this, because you get to bring 2 perspectives, and where you've been a support group leader and you are also someone that lives with it. So to start off, I just wanted to know, what is bipolar disorder?
So bipolar disorder is a mental health illness. It's a mood disorder. And it's called, the full name is bipolar affective mood disorder, affect meaning mood. It's characterized by extreme mood swings, much more so than your average ups and downs during the day. And it starts off by a sort of sense of increased energy, rapid thinking, a lot of a lack of need to sleep. And then it can move into a full-blown manic episode, which can further move in. It's quite it's a very intense experience, and it's called bipolar because on the other side we have depression.
So please explain a bit more what a manic episode is, because I know a lot of people can, due to the other episodes that we've had, they can sort of identify depression because of the symptoms that the other experts have spoken about. But in terms of manic, a manic episode, can you describe that? Because someone also asked, how do you see the symptoms of bipolar as well?
So a manic episode is often called euphoric, Shudu, and for myself, I would say it's not at all euphoric. It's actually a breakdown with your contact with reality. So it usually starts to kind of, an inability to think clearly. You have a lot of racing thoughts, and you make connections where there aren't necessarily connections there. You feel great inspiration, your head is full of ideas, but there's a breakdown in the normal daily activities. So you don't sleep as much, as a reduced need for sleep. You stop eating much. You really struggle to kind of have a grip on your daily life. And because you're not sleeping, because you're not eating, your daily, your actual system, your entire physical and mental system struggle. So it really gets out of control, because your grip on reality gets out of control, and it can lead into hallucinations, delusions, and which is a psychotic state to be in. And when you are psychotic, it's a very dangerous place to be.
And I've heard that there are 2 different types of, I've heard of the 2 different types of bipolar. Do you mind expanding a bit on that, please?
Sure. Actually, in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is the American Psychiatric Manual, it's kind of like the psychiatric Bible, there are actually 5 types of bipolar disorder. So the first one is bipolar 1, which is characterized by mania and depression. The second is bipolar 2, which is characterized more so by the depressive episodes. Then you get cyclothymia, which is less severe experiences of the ups and downs. And then you get bipolar unspecified and bipolar specified. Specified often refers to like drug-induced bipolar. So there really are 5, but the 2 that are most known are bipolar 1 and bipolar 2.
Oh, so they're different. There's more than the 2 that we just know. There's about 4, I think you've mentioned.
Yeah,
4.
there's kind of a scale now in the new diagnostic manual.
Okay. And what are the causes of bipolar disorder? Because a lot of people believe that it can be triggered, but I've heard that it can be genetic or even what do you call this? A chemical imbalance. So do you mind just expanding on that?
Sure. So it can be hereditary. It can be a genetic inheritance, which can be triggered at a certain point. The onset usually is 18 years and over, although we're seeing a lot more of younger children, some that are the age of 14. So it's not only hereditary, it can actually be triggered by a trauma. So sexual assault as a young person, the death of a loved one, anything that is a traumatic experience can actually result in bipolar.
And let's say, what are the symptoms of it? How do you identify it in a loved one? Because in the descriptions that you gave of mania and depression, those sound like things that we can identify ourselves. But then, how does someone out from the outside looking in identify that, or just see if a loved one needs help?
Yeah, it can be quite easily identified because it really is such a change in the person. You know a person, and then suddenly they are acting with distorted behaviors. So I often say, the symptoms are that of distorted behaviors. So if we look at depression, we often have suicidal thoughts. We have a sense of isolation, social anxiety, a general lethargy, a kind of lack of personal hygiene, and sleeping too much, and then insomnia at night, so the sleep patterns are irregular. So depression is better known and can be quite well identified. Mania is the polarity of that. So if you find that your loved one is suddenly kind of having conversations with you and then gets distracted into another conversation, or is having racing thoughts and sort of throwing out the thoughts and they don't make sense to you. If you find that person isn't sleeping or has very broken sleep, if you find that person isn't eating anymore, if you find that there's a breakdown in the normal function of their daily lives. There's also symptoms such as hypersexuality. So you often find people in an episode are kind of behaving in a promiscuous manner. People can have affairs. There's also a symptom of overspending. So it's kind of emotional reasons as opposed to a rational directive to behavior. So you would, for example, for me, I actually once bought a house, which was ridiculous because I had a house. And that was in the throes of a manic episode because I had no ability to manage my finances. And a lot of people living with bipolar struggle as a result of this financially and can end up in a lot of debt. So, it's identifiable by those symptoms. But I think, really it's communication, Shudu. I think if you can't communicate with someone that is a loved one, that's when that's when you have a big problem, and then you can look at how you used to communicate and how you're communicating now and see the discrepancies. Okay.
And then because the things that you're describing, it sounds like if it's not treated, it can become problematic. So how can bipolar disorder be treated?
So there's sort of 3 tiers of treatment. The first is psychiatric treatment. So there are a whole range of medications that the person would be put on, but they would be different. The psychiatrist would do a lot of assessment and would treat the symptoms. So their mood stabilizers, antipsychotics and such. So psychiatric treatment is kind of the bottom tier. Then above that you get psychology. So you get psychotherapy, and these can be various types of psychotherapy: CBT, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, family therapy, because often it affects a loved one and family members, and the talking therapy, of course. And then the third tier for me is lifestyle adjustment. So this includes things like alcohol and drug abuse. You know, substances definitely affect the moods. Things like living in a regular routine, keeping your daily life going well, having your 3 meals a day, healthy sort of food in between, sleeping regularly, taking your meds at the right time, exercising, the things that we all generally need to do in our daily lives. But one has to be very attuned to it when one has bipolar, because it's absolutely crucial that one keeps these, you know, I never call them limitations, I call them like a lighthouse sending out beams, because they just show you which are the safe areas, and those are really in the structure of your day. And so those three, so psychiatric, psychotherapy and lifestyle adjustment.
One of the questions that we got was if the talking therapy, as you call it, is a necessary part of the bipolar treatment, bipolar disorder treatment.
You know, it's very important to go back to the origin of things, because once you know where things come from, or at least you touch on the original experience, you can move forward. So an understanding of the origin is important. And then, you know, what's so important is to be able to talk about an episode after it happens, and to also look to structuring a future. You know, I'm a bipolar coach, and I work with people living with bipolar, and, you know, we think forward. We're forward thinking around how one can move from an unbalanced state of mind into a balanced state of mind where, you know, one can live successfully just like anybody else. Bipolar is definitely manageable, in my experience.
And someone was asking here, is it wise to share your status with others? But and I think it's a good question, because there's a lot of stigma surrounding bipolar disorder, whereby like obviously there's the manic side and the depressive side, but then there's the changes in behavior, but then that leads to a stigma around it, a lot of shame around people for people that are living with bipolar disorder. How do we break the stigma, and even before that, what are the common misconceptions about bipolar?
So, to speak to the breaking of stigma, you know, one is treated as different when one has bipolar, and this can lead to isolation and sort of a sense of self-loathing, and that can result in the person suffering not to seek treatment. So, you know, the stigma and discrimination really puts you into a hole. And the way to challenge stigma and discrimination, in my opinion, is knowledge is power. So the loved one has to do their homework. The second thing is to educate yourself as the sufferer. You know, another thing to do is to really reach out to each other and to communicate with each other. And it's only through compassion and through working together that we can challenge stigma and discrimination. So, yeah, it's going to take, you know, if I think about the HIV/AIDS epidemic, you know, 10, 15 years ago, we couldn't talk about it. People were not disclosing their status. Today, we've got to a place where at least there is a dialogue around HIV and AIDS. I'm hoping that mental health illness will be the next, you know, area that we can move into and have these open discussions. The problem is that the media, you've often seen in a movie, they say, oh, she's bipolar. Or, you know, there's a lot of, as you say, misunderstanding around the illness. This is a very serious, life-threatening mental health illness. And the more compassionate we are, the more empowered we are with knowledge, the better we are to address stigma and discrimination.
And someone is, I think her name, let me just check, Zoleg, I was asking, you spoke about the different kinds of treatments. Is medication the only solution to someone living with bipolar? So do you have to take medication? From your experience? Was it something that was necessary as part of your treatment?
Definitely. And for most people, in my opinion, I mean, that's working from a Western psychiatric paradigm. There are other ways that are out there. There's, some people rely on natural remedies, some people rely on different healers. In my experience, the only thing that's worked is psychiatric medication. There is unfortunately a problem in South Africa with our public healthcare system, where I've often seen that people who are suffering go to the clinic and then they're given their meds, and then the next month they go to the clinic and those meds aren't available. So this is a huge problem for people that don't have private health care. So I would say medication really is the bottom line, but as I said previously, talking therapy, and it need not be, if one can't afford a psychologist, and they're very expensive, certainly if you don't have medical aid, a support group like the one I run, and SADC has plenty of support groups, and actually one of the good things about COVID, if there can be one, is the fact that we're on Zoom platforms now, so they're nationally available, and I mean, I even have some international members on my group. So a support group can be something that's very useful, and then of course, as I said, the lifestyle adjustments. So just really taking care of yourself and self-love, to forgive yourself, because you didn't ask for bipolar. Sometimes a person living with bipolar feels like they're guilty of having bipolar, or that in some weird way they actually asked for it. But to actually have some self-compassion and some self-care is another way of managing it.
And I think from everything that you've explained, a lot of people want to know what it's like living with bipolar disorder. Like, what is it like?
So, I've had bipolar for 32 years. So I was diagnosed in 1989, and it's a hard question to answer and an emotional one to answer, because it's a hell of a journey, Shudu. It's a lifelong condition, and I sort of wake up every day and I know that I have bipolar. It's like something that pops into your mind, and you have to regulate your life. And I think I lived in denial for a long, long time, and that didn't help me. But I was in denial because I believed my mind had become unreliable, and therefore I was a failure, and therefore why should I look after myself? And I kept becoming non-compliant. I abused, substances. I didn't care for myself. And it's very hard, but once I moved into acceptance, it's like everything just relaxed in my life, because I knew what I had. I realized there were ways to manage it. I learned those ways, I educated myself, and I reached out. One of your previous questions was, should one disclose one's status? I was lucky enough that I disclosed my status while my parents knew, but to my friends and a couple of employers. And I was hugely supported, so I wasn't, stigma and discrimination didn't come my way. But I would certainly say to people, be very careful who you disclose to. And by law, you don't have to reveal your mental health status. So it's important to reveal it if you feel comfortable, and if you feel that your confidence will be held by, for example, an HR department, so that you can get flexi time and you can get support. But it's a hard journey. It's hard living with a mental health illness. But there's hope, where there's hope, there's always a bright side to life. And in many ways, actually, to be honest, I'm actually happy that I have bipolar. It's shown me the highs of life, it's shown me the lows of life, it's shown me how to find the middle ground, an equanimity of mind, a kind of even-keeledness. So it's given me a sensitivity, and I think once I moved into that acceptance phase, I could really manage my bipolar and work with my bipolar such that it became a friend in a way to me.
How did you reach that acceptance stage? Because like you're saying, there's a lot of shame for so many people, because a lot of people here is talking about how they can't really reveal it to their loved ones, like we spoke about the stigma. So how do you reveal it knowing there's a possibility that you might be treated differently? How do you speak about it? Because like the stigma around people with bipolar disorders, that they're moody, they're unreliable, those kinds of misconceptions, because it's almost like in as much as you don't trust your mind, other people don't trust it too, as soon as you reveal your bipolar disorder. So how do you get to a point of self-acceptance? Because a lot of people are living with this, but it's not something that can be easily accepted, not even just bipolar disorder, but just various different kinds of mental health illnesses. A person has been diagnosed with depression or anxiety. How do they get to a stage where they know that they're living with this and there's a possibility that they may have to take medication? And please do correct me if I'm wrong. Another person asked if you have to take medication for the rest of your life, you know? So does a person have to take medication for the rest of their lives? And how do you get to a stage of self-acceptance of all those kinds of different treatments? And how do you live with this condition?
I think you get to a place of self-acceptance through the repetition of the illness. So it's a cyclical illness. So you'll go through hypomania, into mania, into depression. And in a way, then you have proof that it exists. And I think once you know that something is there, it's like what they say in the air, once you can identify a problem, you can find a solution. So you move into self-acceptance by acknowledging it's there, and by forgiving yourself. As I said before, none of us asked to have bipolar. We're not guilty of having bipolar. It's something that is part of the cards that we were dealt, you know, and as a result, we have to live the best life we can, and that life is manageable. Again, disclosure must be done carefully. So I would advise people to actually join a support group, to start connecting with like-minded people that are suffering with the same illness, and to start that way through their disclosure. And then, you know, to move to, everyone has one person in their lives who love them unconditionally. There's always that one person. And, you know, I found over time that there are those people who've disappeared out of my life. But to be quite honest, if those people can't accept my experience of my life, then, you know, do I really need those people in my life? But it has to be a gradual process. But the self-acceptance, the getting to know oneself and really delving into your psyche is absolutely, I mean, it's so important to get to know yourself and to, you know, as I said, forgive yourself and love yourself. Really love yourself.
So I think that's the biggest takeaway from this: self-love and also self-care, just being cognizant of your behavior and the changes that happen to you. I think self-love goes a long way with every single mental health illness as well. Just loving yourself and forgiving yourself, because you didn't choose to be the way that you are, to have the mental illness that you have. And on that note, are there any coping tips that you can give people that have helped you?
Yeah, there's lots of coping tips. You know, it's as I said, it's the lifestyle adjustments. It's looking after yourself. It's feeding yourself, sleeping, looking, you know, having social engagements. It's everything around, like having a holistic life, not just focusing on having bipolar, but living all the aspects that make you up as a human being. Managing where you put yourself, managing your stress levels, managing the people you interact with, you know, avoiding people that are vexatious, people that cause you harm, you know, putting yourself in safe spaces with people, making sure that, you know, that your home is, that you're comfortable, that you're dressing up nicely, that you feel good about yourself. Coping skills are also around seeking, you know, some kind of therapy, I see one of the comments there was behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. But, as you go along, you learn coping skills. It's not necessarily only coming from the outside. I learned a lot through my own courage and determination to be well. I learned how to cope, and anyone can learn how to cope with anything. We are only given adversity so that we can triumph. And I really believe that, and especially with people living with bipolar, I've seen it time and time again.
Do you wish other people knew about bipolar that do you feel like they don't know? Like, what is that one thing about bipolar that you wish others knew?
I wish that people would just understand that the symptoms of bipolar, the distorted behaviors of bipolar, are not chosen. Like when you become angry or aggressive, or when you are being promiscuous, or when you sort of are unreliable or distractible. I wish people would know that those are symptoms. It's very hard, I admit, for people to understand, because they seem like one has chosen that behavior. A physical ailment is easier to identify, but a distorted behavior is almost like it seems like a choice. So I wish people would understand the symptoms better and to empower themselves around that, because the SADC stats indicate that 4 million people in South Africa are living with bipolar. That's many, many people, and they have loved ones and family members and friends and community. So this is not a rare thing, actually. It's very much alive in our society.
And you speak about communities and families. How do they get to a stage where they can support someone that's living with bipolar? Because you speak about your experience with substance abuse and all that kind of stuff. You're not the first person that I hear talking about this. So how do you support someone like that? How do you support someone that's living with bipolar but is not has, I wouldn't say bad coping mechanisms, but unhealthy coping mechanisms? How do you help someone or support someone that's living with bipolar?
I think compassion goes a long way, Shudu. I think that spending time with that person, getting to know of their experience of bipolar, introducing and showing them as much sort of help, like almost the role modeling of the loved ones. So for the parents of the person living with bipolar, to ensure that the home is a healthy environment, support to be there when they're sick, just to do the little things like cooking meals and giving them, drinks. There's lots of ways, but it really boils down to accepting that person and understanding that they have a mental health illness that they're struggling with, and to be there for them. And then, to seek advice from other people. There are support groups for family and loved ones, members of that person living with bipolar, so you can seek it. And, family goes a long way, and when we need each other, we need each other, and we're there for each other ultimately. So, those are some of the coping skills I could offer people.
And if you're the person that's living with bipolar, how do you support yourself? Because I don't think we talk enough about the support that you need to give yourself. A lot of people don't even have it's sad that it's a luxury, but the luxury of having family that supports them. So you have just been told that you have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. How do you get to a point where you support yourself? How do you get to a point where you find healthier coping mechanisms? Because from what you've explained, there's a possibility, especially if you're in denial, of unhealthy coping mechanisms, or just living without getting the necessary help that you need. But how do you get to a point, or how did you get to a point where like after you're given your initial diagnosis, learned to support yourself?
Well, I learned to support myself when I actually saw that my diagnosis was useful, and I stopped resisting it. So once I realized it was useful, it was almost like it kind of sheltered me, and it made me relax into it. And then I found ways to, again, it comes back to the self-love. So you support yourself when you endorse yourself. And you endorse yourself when you get to know yourself, and you you forgive yourself. And, you know, again, it all comes down to the self-love. And I think, you know, it's so important to move out of denial because it will keep repeating in your life. So there's no point in resisting what is there. You must accept what is there, and then you can find the mechanism. And you must, you know, and also gratitude goes a long way, Shudu. Just being grateful for your everyday life. You know, the fact that you can wake up and the fact that you can communicate and you have a meal to eat and you have a friend to see. You know, that is self-support as well, engaging with others. And doing good things for yourself, walking in the park, these simple things, they're simple things, but they're enjoyable. Pruning your roses, you know, playing with the kid next door, walking a dog, all these things are self-support because they're nurturing for you. Yeah.
And do you currently live on any medication, or is that something that we're not really allowed to ask?
Oh yes, absolutely. I take a mood stabilizer at night, an antipsychotic at night, and it's kind of like it's a combination between an antidepressant and another mood stabilizer, because we must remember that the SSRIs, which are a type of antidepressant, can push one into a manic episode. So the psychiatrist is very careful about what antidepressants they prescribe. But yeah, and it's interesting you ask the question, because for me, taking medication is like brushing my teeth. You know, my meds are next to my toothbrush, and I pop out my pills and I swallow them. I don't think twice. I'm in that routine of taking them because I know that they support me. I mean, that's another, talking to the question of self-support. I know that taking my meds is a support for me. So yes, I'm certainly on medication, and I'm committed to being on medication for the rest of my life. Sorry, just to go back to another coping skill which has completely changed my life is meditation. I cannot tell you what meditation does for me. I do 35-minute meditation every morning. It sets a default for a stable and happy mind, a peaceful mind. And now that I've been meditating for so long, I can find I can return to that place of stability whenever something triggers me or I'm feeling anxious. I can return back to that state, or I can just practice a basic breathing technique. So meditation is a great coping skill, and there are many ways to learn meditation.
I'm so glad that you brought in the element of meditation, because a lot of people struggle with that, and it's one of the things. It's one of the things that could be helpful for so many people. A lot of people here are actually asking about your support group. They're asking where can.
Wonderful.
Yeah, a lot of people are asking about it.
And everyone's welcome to join. Absolutely, everyone. There's no limit. So I run it on a Wednesday night at 6:30. Currently it's being run by Zoom, so anyone from all around the country can join it. And yeah, if you want details, you can email me. Can I give my email address?
Yes. What we can do, you can send it to me, and then I'll put it on my Instagram story, and then people can access it there. And then if they want to join the support group, then they can just contact you directly.
Perfect. Will do.
And how have you found that the support group helps you?
Well, it helps me in particular because, well, it offers me, you know, a group of people that are like-minded, that have come through time. The ones that, you know, have stuck with the support group have really grown. It's a great sense of, you know, that I'm making a difference, to see people, you know, being comfortable speaking and sharing. And for me personally, it's to support as well. You know, I have a WhatsApp group, so if someone's not feeling well, then we can contact each other. We're always there for each other outside of the support group. And it's just, I can't tell you how important support groups are. And SADA does have many support groups, so I'm very grateful that, you know, they have those out there.
I see a lot of people talking about your support group, saying it's a safe space to be and to talk. So I'm definitely going to share your details. I just wanted to ask, what is your message of hope for people living with bipolar? I know bipolar disorder, I know that you've been living with it for 30 years, and maybe there's someone that's just started living with it. So what do you say to that person, to most people that are on here that are saying that they live with bipolar disorder? What do you say to those people? What is your message of hope?
My message of hope is that with hope, there's the possibility of change. Because what often happens when you first get a diagnosis, or you've had a diagnosis for a while, is that you feel stuck. And when you feel stuck, you can't move. But when you feel hopeful, that possibility of change is out there. So I would also say hope requires courage. And courage can get you anywhere in life. You have to put yourself in a place of priority, and you have to believe in yourself. But with hope comes the possibility of change. So that's my main message to people, and therefore never give up on hope.
And thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it helped a lot of people. A lot of people got more information, and I see a lot of people being interested in wanting to join your support group. And I think having a community of people that will be supporting them and just hearing stories of hope, actually, where you get to see that there's another side. You said you support yourself when you endorse yourself, and I think that was quite an important message, because a lot of people living with mental illnesses never endorse themselves because they feel like they're not worthy of it.
Sure.
So I'm so happy that you said you support yourself and you endorse yourself. So even in the toughest times, please do that. Just because you're living with a mental illness, it doesn't mean that you have to love yourself any less. There's nothing wrong with you. And I think another thing is just that love yourself, love yourself as much as you can, and forgive yourself, because when you live with a mental illness, you tend to beat yourself up about the actions that you went through during an episode. So learn to forgive yourself, learn to love yourself, and yeah, everything will be okay. And just as you said, it's a message of courage and a message of hope. Thank you so much, Samantha.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, please do share your email with me so I can share it with the
I
people
certainly
watching.
will.
Guys, thank you so much for
Thanks,
watching.
everyone.
Thank you. I hope
Okay,
tonight was super
great.
informative. Good night.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.